We have to practice and know for ourselves. Studying from scriptures is good, but it cannot solve suffering. Teachers teach that we should let go of greed, hatred, and delusion, but they themselves can't let go of it. Teaching others is easy, but teaching oneself is hard. But this method of mine is not difficult. You don't have to study or learn anything. Being able to read and write or not is of no importance. Everyone can practice, men as well as women, ordained or not ordained. We can all practice. There is only one Dhamma, not many kinds. To say that the Dhamma of a person who keeps 5 precepts is one thing, that the Dhamma of a person who keeps 8 precepts is another thing, the Dhamma of an ordained person is another thing, the Dhamma of a lay person is another thing, the Dhamma of a person who practices insight meditation yet another thing. That is a different matter. That is not what I'm talking about. I say that there is only one Dhamma. Dhamma is to finish lopa, dosa, and moha. Doing this is what virtue and Dhamma are. It says in the scriptures that virtue is the means to eliminate coarse defilements, concentration is the means to eliminate medium defilements, and wisdom is the means to eliminate subtle defilements. But can we really eliminate them? No. Why not? Because we don't do it properly. The word defilement stands for greed, hatred, and delusion, but most of us understand it only as materialistic, that having money, a big house and a smart car is defilement. But in reality, those things are not defilements. They are just things that come from being diligent and knowing how to work, and from knowing how to save and accumulate things. But the defilements that I'm talking about are greed, hatred, delusion, and sorrow. These defilements are not afraid of anyone, not of rich people, not of influential people, not even of monks ordained for a long time, with the title, are they afraid? They enter into everyone's mind. On speaking in another way, we could say that the defilements slap everyone's face. A wealthy person, on being told off a bit, is displeased. This shows that the defilements slap him or her in the face. Or when someone praises him or her, satisfaction arises. This is the defilements slapping his or her face. These defilements are not afraid of anyone at all. They are only afraid of those who are disciples of the Buddha, they are afraid of those who develop the 4 foundations of awareness in the right way, they are ashamed, they don't dare to come close, because that person has the eye to see the Dhamma, the wisdom to see clearly. Of the lay people who have come here today, some people are still young, only 20 to 30 years old. If you develop awareness in the right way, within 2 or 3 years you will go beyond suffering, and during the remaining part of your life, you will just have happiness. Even older people 50 or 60 years old, are the same. Until you die your life will only have happiness. And when you die without suffering. If you still have another 9 or 10 years to live, it will be 9 or 10 years without suffering, with only happiness and coolness of mind. This is the heartwood, the essence of Buddhism. The word Buddha means the one who knows, the awakened one who is joyful with Dhamma. I have shared some of my reflections and understanding. It is a shortcut to practicing Vipassana. It is instantaneous. Having listened, please practice with every breath, no matter where you are, whatever work you are engaged in. You can practice while washing clothes, doing the dishes, sweeping up, or working in the field. Vipassana is wisdom, it is life, it is virtue, it is the Dhamma, it is everything. It is the real life, it is the real Dhamma. May you understand it like this. Summary of the shortcut. I'll give you a few small reflections. 1. To be diligent in developing awareness in all postures, turn the hand up, turn the hand down, raise the hand, lower the hand, walk back and forth, lean to the right and the left, blink the eyes, open the mouth, swallow saliva, breath in and out, fully feeling yourself doing it. This is called having sati. It is equal to throwing sesame seeds into the abyss. When awareness is complete, wisdom arises to really know and see the following matters: rupa, nama, rupa doing, nama doing, rupa disease, nama disease, knowing instability, impermanence and non-selfhood, knowing convention, knowing religion, knowing Buddhism, knowing evil, knowing merit. Really knowing. These are objects to know with real awareness and wisdom. 2. Next, to work with the mind, look at the mind with awareness. Whatever the mind thinks, immediately know it and conquer it. When we immediately know and conquer thought, this is called working with the mind. 3. Do it until you are nimble and swift, until greed, hatred and delusion stop arising. It is the calming and extinguishing of suffering in the mind. This type of suffering we can't chase away as we would chase off a pig, a dog, a duck, or a chicken. We must depend on the development of awareness, and see our minds in order to deal with these types of defilements. If we don't see our minds, we will be empty, similar to a pit or abyss that is never full. When we have awareness, it means it is full, it is no longer a pit or an abyss, and lopa, dosa, and moha don't have a place to enter, because awareness is full. Whatever work we do it with sati panyat. There is no delusion, only rightness. These types of defilements are ugly and worthy of getting fed up with. Whoever is a disciple of the Buddha with an eye to see the Dhamma, will not have them lying around in his or her mind. They are afraid. Suppose we have defilements at a level of 100%. They slap our face 100%. When we see and understand them, they will gradually diminish. Then, when we try to become familiar with looking at our minds, the defilements will diminish increasingly, step by step. When it reaches 100%, we're rid of suffering. What is left is 100% happiness. Therefore, may you all try to practice and reach the real peace and happiness. The path of peace. May you all listen well, this time, so that satipanya springs up. Knowing suffering. Something we have in common is that we don't want suffering, we hate it. Then how does suffering arise? Suffering arises because we don't know. Suffering doesn't exist within us, and it doesn't arise all the time. What really exists for sure is normality. By nature, the mind of each person is in a state of normality. As we're working, if we do it with delusion, it is called suffering. Most people have suffering while working because they don't see suffering. People who go and see movies and shows do so because suffering leads them. This is due to our not watching minds. The moment we want to go and watch a movie, a thought flashes up that we want to watch a movie. We're not thinking it all day long. When the thought comes up, we don't see the thought. We only just know the thought, and we act, following the thought. This is called suffering. People who smoke are the same. Sometimes they don't even think to smoke but simply follow their moods. They take a cigarette to smoke because they think it is happiness, but actually it is suffering that compels them to do it. Suffering stinks. As to this word suffering, the Buddha sometimes calls it suffering, sometimes defilement, sometimes stench. When talking about suffering or defilements, one notes that it has an ugly smell to it, according to Buddhism. Suffering is something dirty and it stinks, nobody wants it. As soon as the body dies, it starts to rot and stink. But we can still wash and clean it. Excrement is something that stinks, and we detest it. Nobody wants to touch or grab hold of it. But even with such stinking things, the Buddha said, they don't stink all that much, they can still be touched and washed. But the stinking things to which the Buddha is referring are really stinky. They are greed, hatred, and delusion, concealed in our minds, ready to bubble up. The Buddha condemns this emphatically. If anyone's mind still has greed, hatred, and delusion, the Buddha says that it stinks more than excrement. As soon as the mind thinks something in a flash, a person who doesn't know, doesn't see, and doesn't understand becomes deluded immediately. This arising is called by the Buddha a stain. The word stain means delusion. Even though we've never known, seen, or watched our minds, we still say that we see. But in reality it is not seeing, it is only just knowing thought, and then we act according to the thought. When we say to see, it should mean that we see defilements. That is, we see that either there is greed, hatred, or delusion mixed up in thought, or there is not. To see like this, we have to practice Dhamma first. Practicing Dhamma. Vipassana. In practicing Dhamma, even though one may practice various methods for a long time, if one doesn't perceive that point where the mind is manifesting, one still doesn't understand. One still doesn't understand the main principle of practice according to the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha said that he was enlightened because he worked with the mind, practiced with the mind. But most of us just make merit and give offerings in order to chase off suffering. We haven't yet practiced by following the Buddha style. The Buddha once taught that the results of making merit 100 or 1,000 times are less than is gained by keeping the precepts even once. The results of keeping precepts 100 or 1,000 times are less than making the mind peaceful through practicing tranquility meditation once, and the results of making the mind peaceful through practicing tranquility meditation 100 or 1,000 times are less than practicing insight meditation once. What does insight mean? Insight means to clearly and truly see in a way that is different from one's original way of seeing. Different because the original way of seeing is a state that doesn't know, see, and understand clearly. Briefly stated, the mind is muddled up. Doing Vipassana means to be aware. Being aware is very fruitful. The Buddha practiced Dhamma through being aware, and so became enlightened. Peace. Most of us understand that in order to be an arahant, we have to do tranquility meditation and make the mind peaceful. In reality, there are two kinds of peace, namely, peace that is like being inside a cave, and peace that is like being outside a cave. Peace inside a cave means it is just as though we're in a cave or we're in a dark room. When we light a fire, the darkness disappears and light come to take its place, but as soon as the fire goes out, the darkness come back again. Even when we've made a fire and there's light, we're still in the cave and we still can't see the shape of the cave. We only just see certain things inside the cave. Peace inside a cave is therefore called peace under the influence of moha, a not knowing kind of peace, or even a not wanting to know kind of peace. That some people go and sit to make their minds peaceful, understanding that they're developing insight, this is so, but it's a diluted kind of truth. As for peace outside a cave, it's just like being outside a cave, but it's not dark. There's no need to make a fire, and we're able to know and see what the shape of the cave is like. This may be likened to peace that is without delusion, i.e., peace due to the absence of defilements. There is no lopa, dosa, or moha. In order to achieve this kind of peace, we have to realize and truly see first. Seeing truly and clearly is called insight. Insight is to realize and truly see according to reality. Peace outside the cave is therefore called a knowing kind of peace. One is peaceful because one knows. I want to shake up and warn all of you that developing insight has many obstacles. If we don't know, we'll go wrong, but when we see, know, and understand, we can solve the problems. The first obstacle. The first obstacle in developing Vipassana can appear when we make movements with the body, and sati is aware of it. Wisdom arises in the mind that knows reality as it really is. That is, it knows rupa, nama, it knows instability, impermanence and non-selfhood, it knows convention, it knows religion, knows Buddhism, knows evil and knows merit. This is wisdom knowing through Vipassana. But it's only just the outer bark of Vipassana, still not able to deal with suffering. It is just knowing in knowing, it is knowing through thought, knowing the scriptures. It is defilement due to Vipassana. The obstacle is that when this kind of knowledge arises, we get buried in it, a kind of knowledge that is still similar to being inside a cave. Therefore, next we must try and find a method to get out of the cave, to pull ourselves out of that knowledge, gradually, by watching our thoughts. As soon as a thought flashes up, know, see, and understand that it has come up. This is practicing Dhamma a little bit deeper. Ordinarily, a tree has an outer bark. When one removes the outer bark, he reaches the layer with the nourishing sap inside. Removing that layer, one reaches the white wood. Removing that, one comes to the hardwood. Buddhism is the same. Knowing Rupanama, evil and merit is also knowledge, but it is outer knowledge, enough to deal with suffering on one level, such as not being foolish by believing in auspicious things and lucky omens, or in ghosts and angels. But when one is in such a state, greed, hatred, and delusion are still there, because one doesn't know the origin or source of it. To solve this problem, to know the origin of the arising of greed, hatred, and delusion, we must watch our minds, like a cat that waits for a chance to grab a mouse. As soon as a thought comes up in the mind, look at it and fix on it so that it is known in time. A thought comes. Whack, cut it off straight away. Another one, whack, cut it off right there. Do this often. Thoughts will thereby decrease and awareness will increase. Just as with the positive and the negative. When there is more of the positive, the negative lessens. We start off never having seen thought, thinking 100 things and never seeing a single thought. But when we are watching like this, we catch it once and cut it off. The remaining thoughts are less than 100 now and will steadily decrease step by step, as long as we keep at it. We keep gazing like this, a thought comes, we cut it off, another one arises, we drop it. When we think 100 thoughts and we know 95 of them, it shows that we have a lot of awareness. Just 5 thoughts left that we can't keep up with. Right here is where we have to put forth effort, watch thought but don't be caught up in the thought. When we know and see all the 100 thoughts, keep up with every thought every time, it is equal to knowing and seeing exactly where greed, hatred, and delusion are born. We have to throw them off so that defilements are unable to arise. This is called to keep abreast by knowing, to know in time. Knowing how to prevent, knowing how to solve. This is where we're able to deal with lopa, dosa, and moha. Defilements can arise because we get deluded right here. We don't know that their origin is right here. This refers even to someone who goes to the monastery to listen to talks, who makes offerings, who keeps precepts and develops both tranquility and insight meditation. If that person has still never seen his or her own thoughts, then that person is still far from the truth taught by the Buddha. Contrariwise, even if a person has never gone to a monastery to listen to the Dhamma, has never made offerings or kept precepts, but is always aware of what his or her mind is thinking, that person equals with knowing. He keeps abreast of thoughts, knows how to prevent, knows how to solve and knows how to conquer every time. That person is close to the truth, the Dhamma taught by the Buddha. Have you ever heard of the Buddha having taught that the Dhamma exists already? But there is nobody with discernment who can dig it up and find it, so it stays undiscovered. Because it is undiscovered, people make merit, give offerings, keep precepts, and do samatha meditation in order to develop good habits. So we believe that it is meritorious and wholesome to accumulate those things for the next life or for the future. This is wrong understanding. The Buddha didn't teach like this. The Buddha taught us to see our own minds. We have heard the story of the monk Wakali, who was attached to the Buddha's body and never looked at his own mind. When he was corrected by the Buddha, he became so upset that he was going to jump from a cliff and die. The Buddha stopped him and taught him that it is difficult to get born as a human being. And it's very rare for a human being to have an opportunity to listen to the Dhamma from a noble person. The Buddha said further that his body was just material. After his death it would rot and stink. That is not the Buddha. The real Buddha can be found within the monk Wakali. It is the Dhamma that is present in all people, that is, cleanliness, brightness and peace, which is the Buddha. The Buddha proclaimed, "Whoever sees the Dhamma, sees me. Whoever doesn't see the Dhamma, doesn't see me, even when taking hold of my robe or my finger." The monk Wakali woke up and started to work with the mind, and he saw his own thinking. Seeing the Dhamma. I would like to remind you once more that the word Dhamma refers to our seeing, our own minds at the moment that we are acting, talking or thinking. This is what is called seeing the Dhamma. I dare to insist that the very life of the Dhamma exists in all people without exception, no matter whether you are a man or a woman, a monk or a novice, no matter what nationality you may have, whatever language you may speak of, whatever clothes you may wear. It's all the same. The Dhamma is the actions of body, speech, and mind. Actions of the body other people can see, actions of speech others can hear, but actions of the mind others are not able to see. You can only see them yourself. For this reason, the monk Wakali felt at ease viewing it like this. Whether he saw the body of the Buddha or not, he would feel at ease because he saw the real Buddha, that is, really seeing according to reality, an ability that exists in everyone. The Buddha once described seeing in this way, with flowers, black, red, white, or whatever color, they are all ready to bloom when touched by sunshine. That I'm giving you these reflections right now is the same. Anyone can apply them in daily life, whether man or woman, whatever clothes he or she may be wearing, whatever religion is upheld. It can be used by everyone in the same way, because we all have a body and mind. When one sees one's own mind at the moment that it thinks, this indicates that one sees one's own mind at the origin or source of thought. The Buddha points to thought, which must be watched with awareness, as one must not get caught up in the thoughts. Whoever sees this, he or she is called by the Buddha a flower that is ready to bloom when the sun shines. The word sunshine refers to the teachings of the Buddha that direct us to practice with the mind. Whatever work you do, control your thoughts with awareness. Some people don't do it yet, because they're not interested. But when we are interested, when we are suffering, we must be ready to do it. There are 84,000 teachings in Buddhism. They are not for reciting and for performing ceremonies. That was not the Buddha's intention. The Buddha's teachings have nothing at all to do with superstition. They are to be practiced only in order to solve the suffering of the mind. Some people might agree that without ceremonies and rituals Buddhism can't extinguish suffering. This fails to understand the meaning in the right way. We've heard that in the time of the Buddha, when he would expound the Dhamma to people, there were many people, who would open the eye to see the Dhamma and enter the stream of Nibbana, from the first stage of enlightenment upwards by the time the discourse was finished. They didn't have to perform rites and rituals other than working with the mind, as the Buddha indicated. Wherever we explain the Dhamma, if we don't make this point, our words are a stain. Why are they a stain? They are a stain because we don't indicate the way that people who are interested in the Dhamma must practice, in order to free oneself from suffering and defilements. And they are a stain because we thereby abandon these effective teachings. Therefore, may you all try to understand this point without fail. If we don't practice according to this important teaching, then we fail to understand the teaching of the Buddha. The second obstacle. The second obstacle in developing insight is that when we begin to understand and see this point, we are able to destroy greed, hatred, and delusion to some extent, but at the same time, joy is lying concealed within it. The Buddha says this is still not right. Joy is darkness, but it is white darkness. Joy is due to our satisfaction and pride that we can do it. White darkness is frightening because it is hard to see. Black darkness is easy to see because it is dark. Being caught up in joy is to see wrong as right, because as soon as we can destroy some defilements, we don't watch at the point where the defilements are destroyed, but we get sucked into the point where joy arises. Therefore joy is an obstacle in attaining higher stages to Nibbana. Being caught up in joy is equal to being caught up in thinking. A thought comes up and we get caught up in the thought, so we don't see the thought. When we get caught up in joy, we don't see joy, and we're just content with joy. Because of this, the Buddha teaches us to pull ourselves out of the thought that we're thinking, to stand outside of it. Then we will see our thoughts. People who still don't know and see their thoughts say just the same, that they know thought. But in reality they don't understand that thoughts come up continuously, and they get caught up in them. Those who have joy or are attached to the peace of tranquility meditation are the same. They are caught up in peacefulness, don't know that peace is delusion, and thus get caught up in peace. It is comparable to someone who doesn't know how to turn on the light. He or she turns the light bulb. No light appears. The person who pulls him or herself out of thought, and knows and sees thoughts, may be compared to someone who knows how to turn on the light. That person turns on the switch and light does appear. So we have to know the origin of thought and come to an understanding with these little thoughts of ours. Then we will have as much ability as an electric light in brightening the interior of the mind, just as one correctly turns on the light with the switch. When we're looking at our minds, there is no greed, hatred, and delusion. But the moment that we're not looking and lose awareness, greed, hatred, and delusion can come back, and we can get caught up in them. It's just like a car driving along the road. At the place where the car passes there is a wind blowing behind it, leaves and dust flap and flutter at the back of the car. Thoughts of greed, hatred, and delusion flash up for a moment, and we follow them. How can we still say that we know thought? In reality we don't see thought, but we get caught up in it. The Buddha teaches that whoever doesn't see one's own thoughts is a heedless person. Heedlessness is poison to one's life, it's like being dead. This is what I said, it stinks. The Buddha said that there is nothing that stinks as much as the mind that has greed, hatred, and delusion, the mind that is stained, the dirty mind. Our real mind isn't dirty or stained at all. It's like a light bulb. The filament in the bulb is not dirty, but dust can settle on the outside of the bulb, the inside is still as bright as before. Or we could compare it with the sun. When clouds obscure the light from coming to the earth, it gets dark, but the sun is still as bright as before. Vidchat, avidchat. People who don't see thought and get caught up in thought are called people in the cycle of dependent origination. They are people who don't know. We've probably heard this. Avidchat is the condition for formation to arise, formations are the condition for the birth of consciousness, consciousness conditions mentality materiality, mentality materiality conditions the six senses, the six senses condition contact, contact conditions feeling, feeling conditions craving, craving conditions clinging, clinging conditions being, being conditions birth, and birth conditions old age, death, and suffering. It's a cycle. Avidchat translates as not knowing. We say that we know, but we don't see our minds. Instead we get caught up in thought. As for the word vidchat, it means knowing, seeing one's own thoughts. A thought comes up, we see it, and it stops. It's like a cat and a mouse. If we don't have a cat at home, the mice are not afraid, but when we have a cat, it will catch the mice as soon as they show their faces. The mice die of shock when they get caught. They can die even though the cat doesn't bite. They have such shock, never been caught by a cat before. This is similar to our fixing on thoughts in our minds. When a thought comes, we know it in time, and it immediately stops, comes to a halt, can't concoct any further. This is called vidchat, knowing, to know in time, knowing how to prevent, knowing how to solve and knowing how to conquer, just like a cat and a mouse. If we don't reflect on the teachings of the Buddha, we don't understand them, and we argue and debate about the teachings, competing with each other. This is not right. Someone who has studied the teaching, and employs that knowledge as a tool for killing defilement, or dealing with suffering is doing it right, according to the Buddha's intention. These days, we study the Buddhist scriptures until we have degrees, up to the 9th level. Some may look at their own thoughts, but some never watch their minds at all. Whoever has studied but never seen his or her own thoughts, says the Buddha, are like a termite that makes holes and eats books. With academic studies it's the same, studying until one has university degrees, but still never watching one's mind. Such persons know about other people but don't know and see themselves. These people are not considered wise in Buddhism because their knowledge is only of use in an academic way, but is not useful spiritually. When we have a university degree we should deal with our minds also, that is, eliminate defilements, the coarse ones as well as the medium and subtle ones. Going against the stream of thought. We've all probably heard that the Buddha at one time practiced by tormenting himself, but saw that that method was wrong and stopped it. After that, he partook of food offered by a lady named Suchata. The Buddha asked her, "Do you offer just the food or is the tray included as well?" She answered that all was offered. Having finished the meal, the Buddha took the tray to the bank of the river and made the following resolution: if he would be enlightened, may the tray placed on the water flow against the current. This is not a true story, it's an illustration and has meaning on the level of the mind. The tray is the mind, the water represents the defilements, and the Buddha working with the mind is the action of going against the stream. The Buddha didn't let his mind follow the defilements. The current of the water is the current of thought. Following defilements is easy, everyone is doing it already, and so we have suffering. The Buddha practiced going against the stream of defilements for the extinguishing of suffering by watching the mind, seeing his own mind thinking. As soon as a thought would come up and there was desire to follow what the eye saw, the ear heard, the nose smelled, the tongue tasted, or the body felt, the Buddha saw those thoughts as defilements. He practiced going against the current of thought, not following the thoughts, which want things. Practicing like this, knowledge arose in him and he was enlightened. The thing that the Buddha points out to us to practice is to know thought with awareness, looking at our own minds. Whatever thought comes up, we should know and understand it, so that the thought does not proliferate further. When thought flashes up, we watch it with awareness, and the thought stops by itself. In practicing Dhamma, the thing to be careful about is the knowledge that knows things outside of ourselves. This kind of knowledge is defilement due to Vipassana. When we have such knowledge, it gives rise to gladness and joy. Joy is called white darkness. It is wrong knowing. Don't get attached to joy. Continuing the practice to the end, until we clearly see our thoughts, their origin, and their source, we come at last to the state of arising, passing. It is a break-off, a final exhaustion. I've compared it many times with a rope, tightly tied on both sides and being cut in the middle with a knife. The rope breaks, one cannot pull it together again, that is, one can't use it anymore. The 12 senses are similar, on seeing a form with the eye, on hearing a sound with the ear, etc., let there only just be seeing and hearing and so on. Don't concoct it into beautiful or ugly, good or bad, pleasing or displeasing sound, the sound of a woman, the sound of a man, etc. Just simply see or hear neutrally. But these are still mere words. In practice, we have to look and see and break them apart. When they are broken, there is not more concocting, the senses are not able to reach each other anymore. Cleanliness, brightness, and peace. Our minds are already clean, bright and peaceful. Clean means not dirty, because there are no defilements. Bright means there is wisdom, seeing our minds, or life. Peaceful means having stopped, there is no longer anything further to add. Summary. At this point, I'll summarize the principles of practice. First, the first stage is to catch the movements of the body in all the postures. When we can catch them, we will know the convention that we can see with our eyes and touch with our hands. This is objective, external. Second, having practiced the first stage, a little bit of knowledge arises, it is called defilements due to Vipassana. It is important to avoid this, not being too glad with the knowing, and continuing to watch the mind, When we see, know, and understand our minds penetratingly, greed, hatred and delusion will be destroyed to some extent. Third, when greed, hatred, and delusion have gone down a bit, we'll feel joyfulness. When joy arises, fix on it, but don't be caught up in joy. We have to pull ourselves out of it. Keep watching the mind. At this stage, wisdom knowledge will appear that destroys or diminishes clinging and grasping. Fourth, when attachment has decreased, one will see, know, and understand normality. The body is normal, speech is normal, and the mind is normal. This normality is called virtue concentration wisdom. Fifth, when seeing the state of arising passing, if one doesn't understand it, one will hold an abnormal view, but if one is fully aware, practice reaches its end. Therefore, I encourage you to try to practice until you meet with your own thoughts and are able to pull yourself out of them. Stages of practice. Determine to listen well, all lay people and monastic friends. When you determine to pay attention, you'll be able to remember. It is called knowing through memory and comprehension. From that, we study or practice to realize and truly know, or we have knowledge coming from our own vision and experience. Most people don't yet know and understand from studying and practicing, they only know how to make merit, to be generous, to keep precepts and to do tranquility meditation. But when it comes to more profound matters, that is to say, how to develop insight meditation, there are really very few people who know and understand it. With Vipassana it is usually a specific case, a specific individual, who knows and teaches it. Because of this, people are lazy and don't want to practice. As far as practice goes, they only know tranquility meditation, which they think is the same as doing Vipassana. This is because they still don't realize and really know. Their knowledge comes only through memory and comprehension. So, we make ourselves peaceful, but we don't understand clearly that there are two kinds of peace, namely peace under the influence of delusion, and peace due to awareness and wisdom. The path that is not a path. When we create the cause by meditating, the mind becomes peaceful as a result. For example, we recite the word Buddho. I used to do this, inhaling, Bud, exhaling, Tho. While doing walking meditation one recites Buddho with every step, walking in accordance with the breathing. These things create peace because it is done slowly. After that, I met a teacher from the north named Sao, who told me that one cannot climb a tree from the top, that one has to start at the roots. He taught me to count 1, 2, 3, until 10, and back again 10, 9, 8, until 1. He said this is beginning at the beginning. This is another way of following the breath, inhaling say 1. Exhaling say 2, etc., the only difference being the words you use. Seeing the Dhamma. Seeing the Dhamma. In practicing Dhamma our views or intentions may not be the same, therefore the practice and the results of practice are not the same. Instead of talking about the differences in practice, I'll talk about seeing the Dhamma. To practice in order to see to Dhamma, some people have to sit or lie down with eyes closed and reflect. Then, they see colors, lights, ghosts, angels, heaven and hell or hungry ghosts and animals. This kind of seeing is fantasy or illusion, one thinks and then sees it. This is not right, according to the teachings of the Buddha, because when we open the eyes, we no longer see it. This is called defilement because we don't see our thoughts. The mind thinks but we don't see it, letting defilements deceive us or, one could say, letting them slap our face. This is not seeing the Dhamma. Seeing the Dhamma with awareness and wisdom, from really having developed insight, is the opposite. We must see ourselves, see materiality and mentality, comprehend Rupa and Nama. This is really seeing ourselves. We really see with open eyes, we see as we're acting, speaking, thinking, and doing various jobs. This is called seeing the Dhamma. The Dhamma is something that we have to see at the moment that we're doing good and doing evil, or neither good nor evil. To see the Dhamma with awareness and wisdom is to see like this. On seeing, one must be sure the object of the seeing can't change into something else. This is really seeing the Dhamma. That's why I say that they are opposites, one is seeing an illusion, another is seeing with awareness and wisdom. In the past, I used to understand that it was as I just described, but when I really understood Dhamma, according to the teachings of the Buddha, I saw that that was wrong. We have to see ourselves in order to see the Dhamma. To see other things is defilement. Some teachers say that is seeing the Dhamma, that one has this and that knowledge. These are people who still do not understand. They create things with thought, it's not anything real. If it is real, one must really see oneself. Sitting we see, lying down we see, walking we see, wherever we come and go we see ourselves. This is called really seeing the Dhamma. To see the external, rupa, nama, is called seeing the bark of the Dhamma. To see with awareness ourselves acting, speaking, and thinking is to see on a deeper level. And to see, know, and understand thoughts arising is to see even more deeply. When seeing ourselves acting, talking, and thinking, something bad arises, we must conquer it. We don't act on it, we don't follow that low impulse. The Buddha said that low thoughts are defilements, they are suffering, they are forms of greed, hatred, or delusion. And when they are greed, hatred, or delusion, they will lead to suffering. Before we get angry or make a mistake, we don't see ourselves. We don't see our mind that is thinking. But when we do see ourselves as we're getting angry, we know that we're getting angry, and don't have to get angry. When we see our minds thinking like this, it stops. The Buddha calls this seeing, knowing, and understanding. Really seeing the Dhamma. To see the Dhamma, we must see the kind of Dhamma that the Buddha saw. We've heard that the Buddha went to study and practice Dhamma. Therefore we know that the Dhamma existed already before the Buddha. To exist already means that when we are born we already have rupa and nama, or a body and mind. This mind of ours is there already. But we never look at it, we look somewhere else. We watch other people doing good and bad. We criticize others. That's how it is. That's why I say that people don't see themselves. Some people, having been born, up to age 9 or 10, or even 100, until death, never watch materiality and mentality, never look at their own minds even once. Having been born a human being thus doesn't have any value. We can call it taking a loss in being born human. Some people watch themselves, once or twice perhaps before they die. So in coming together here, or coming to train ourselves, we must try to look at our mind. If we see our mind as it is thinking, even a little, on some occasions, we will develop the strength and ability to produce light inside our mind. Before this, our mind was dark and blind, but when we come to understand, and to see little by little, we're able to chase away the darkness or delusion. Darkness, here, does not mean the same as traveling without light. It's not like that. This darkness refers to our not seeing our own mind. In reality our mind, everyone's mind, is already clean, bright, and peaceful. Clean means not soiled, bright means seeing clearly. Seeing what? Seeing our life and our mind. Seeing it clearly. Peaceful means enough, stopping, no need to add anything by studying because there is just this much. For people to avoid suffering, we must watch right here. Therefore, the Buddha teaches that our not seeing our mind, can be compared to clouds or a murky sky concealing the sunlight. The light of the sun cannot reach the surface of the earth. At any moment that we don't see our life, don't see our mind, at that moment we are those whom the Buddha described as someone without awareness. One might even say someone with defilements because, at that moment defilements overwhelm us in our mind. And we follow the whims of those defilements, even though the mind itself remains clean, bright, and peaceful. That's why the Buddha teaches us to be aware, to comprehend and see clearly within ourselves. To see the Dhamma, we have to see ourselves. That is how the Buddha sees the Dhamma. When seeing like this, one can chase away greed, hatred, and delusion. In reality, greed, hatred, and delusion don't exist in us, they just flash up for a moment only. It is similar to ice. Ice is made into lumps, but the lumps don't endure. When they are exposed to the weather, they dissolve and return to their original state of being water. Greed, hatred, and delusion are similar, they don't endure, but only appear in a flash. When we don't see the course of events, we don't see their arising, and we can say, they slap our face. Or, like a car driving down the road, dust flutters at the back of the car, which passes in a moment, and the dust settles. Thought, that is greed, hatred, and delusion, is the same. They are only there for a short period, but we comply with them. So the Buddha taught us to see and understand our mind, to have enough awareness to keep up with, and know how to prevent thought, to know how to deal with and be able to really conquer the mind. This is seeing the Dhamma. You have to see it in this way. Don't see it any other way. Seeing the Dhamma can be compared to many things, for example, wind blowing against a tree. We don't know where the wind is, but the leaves flutter. Defilements are the same. They don't stay long, they just come up in a flash. But we act, speak, and think following them, these low things. The Buddha, therefore, said that they are kilesa. Defilements are suffering. We must try to make ourselves aware and to have the wisdom to watch and see our mind, to view all with knowing, to know in time, to know how to prevent and solve, and to be able to beat the defilements. When we see our thoughts like this, we see immediately what suffering is, what defilements are, and when we see that, then the thoughts, which are defilements or suffering, are not concocted any further. Really, the Buddha perceives it this way, and my understanding is that it really must be like this way. Because we don't see, we just follow what others do and don't give attention to this matter. We don't turn around to look at ourselves. Instead, we watch others acting, talking, and thinking, or we pay attention to cars, motorcycles, the environment, children, and so forth. We look over there, but we never turn to look at ourselves, not even once. When we don't look at ourselves, we forget ourselves, we get deluded just looking at others. The Buddha calls people like that someone with defilements or cankers. The word canker can be used to refer to defilement. We have come together to train in insight. The word Vipassana is just a Pali word. It is Dhamma language. In ordinary speech, it means clearly seeing. When we see clearly, we see differently from before, and make a shift in consciousness. What is it that insight sees clearly? It clearly sees ourselves acting, speaking, and thinking. That's what it sees. And it sees differently from before. Formerly we didn't understand that things are like this. A shift in consciousness. We stop things that are bad because we are no longer deluded. In the past we used to revere ghosts and angels, gamble, drink alcohol, take various kinds of drugs, go out at night to watch shows and so forth. We used to do these things, but when we see that all of this amounts only to desires and defilements, we stop. But our mind itself abides in normality. It desires nothing. It is clean, bright, and peaceful in itself. But when something arises, it happens in a flash. We get lost in it because we don't see it in time. This is precisely the point at which the Buddha said the mind gets overwhelmed by defilements, or, putting it into simple language, where the defilements slap our faces. When the defilements slap our face, we have to do as they say because we can't beat them, they are the boss. Therefore, we must become their master, having power over them through awareness and wisdom, through the development of insight, through clear seeing, for example. When we can see like this, defilements cannot come close, cannot arise, because we see the defilements now. In order to see like this, we must practice in the right way, we must comprehend the origin of thought. It compares with someone who wants to have the light on, but doesn't know how to go about it. That person doesn't know the source that makes the light appear. He has seen light coming from the bulb, so he turns and twists at the bulb. He may continue with that action until he dies, but no light is going to appear because he's not doing things as they should be done. He doesn't know the starting point of the light. But someone who is smart, who knows the real source of the light, won't take hold of the light bulb. He'll just turn the switch, and the light appears at the bulb. Practicing insight meditation is the same. If we're clever, and we know, see, and understand according to the Buddha's way, we comprehend that greed, hatred, and delusion don't exist in us, that suffering of that kind really doesn't exist in us. Though we don't know the method, we want to deal with that kind of suffering. We want to find a solution for greed, hatred, and delusion. We want to chase it away. So we practice meditation to develop insight, sit or lie down with eyes closed to get some peace, and we get peace, but that kind of peace is not the same as seeing clearly. It is peace in the cave. When we're in a cave, we see inside the cave, but the cave itself we don't see. When we make a fire, it is true that the darkness disappears, but we're still surrounded by darkness, and as soon as the fire goes out, the darkness comes back, faster than the speed of sound. Now, we come out of the cave and there is no more need to light a fire. Being outside, we can see inside the cave as well as outside of it. We see everything. This kind of peace is not the same as the other kind, it is not the same as the kind of peace we experienced when we were still in the cave. This is seeing clearly, and when we see clearly there is peace. That is why, I say that there are two kinds of peace. Peace in the cave is one kind of peace. It is peace without seeing, without comprehending the cave. As for the peace outside the cave, it is not that kind of peace. It is a peace as a result of seeing clearly. Seeing clearly is a kind of peace. What kind of peace is peace, due to seeing clearly? It is peace due to the absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. One is peaceful because he is not caught up in anything. This is peace due to seeing clearly. When things are clear, they're peaceful. One can call it peace or not call it peace, because the word peace is just convention. This kind of peace is without defilement because one sees the defilements at every moment. The Buddha teaches in this way, but regardless, this is what we want. We want peace. It's just that we don't know the method for turning on the light. When we do know the method, and the time comes to do it, we turn the switch and click, light appears at the light bulb over there. When we have developed insight in the right way and someone says something, good or bad, our awareness and wisdom do their job as fast as lightning. The speed of awareness and wisdom that arises from developing insight, compares with a cat and a rat. However fast the rat is, the cat is on the lookout already. As soon as the rat comes jumping over, the cat grabs it, whack. At the moment the cat pounces on it, the rat dies of shock, that very instant. The blood doesn't run because the rat is so shocked, never been caught by a cat before. The cat eats the rat without blood flowing. It is the same with the mind. When we are watching like this, a thought comes up and, whack. The thought is intercepted immediately because we see clearly and really know. There is enough awareness, it is in time, we can prevent and deal with the thought, and we conquer it. So the mind doesn't get concocted, and there are no defilements. This is the way the Buddha teaches. Therefore, to see clearly like this is the highest merit and wholesomeness in Buddhism. Or, to say it another way, it is seeing the Dhamma. To see the Dhamma is to see what? To see the outer Dhamma, is to see materiality and mentality, or to see oneself acting, talking, and thinking. This is one part. The other part is to see the mind as it is thinking. The mind is not anything solid that can be seen with the eyes. It has to be seen through awareness and wisdom. The Buddha talks about having sharp faculties, the faculty of sight. This is a deeper level of seeing the Dhamma. The ability to see like this, is something that everyone already possesses without exception. That's why the Buddha said, the Dhamma is there already. When we were born this existed already, but it was turned over, just like something that is turned over and no one turns it back up. So we don't see it. Or it's just like something that is closed, and there is no one to open it up. But now, our Buddha opens it up or turns it upright, so that people can see it immediately. This is the reason why, when the Buddha would go around expounding the Dhamma, those who listened with determination would open the eye with which to see the Dhamma, or they would enter the stream of Nibbana, as it is called. The Buddha illustrated seeing the Dhamma in many ways. Lotuses or other types of flowers, whatever color they may have, be it red, white, purple, or whatever, are all ready to bloom when they get in touch with sunlight. The method to develop insight is the same. If just this is pointed out, we simply practice at this one point, and everyone is able to do it because the Dhamma is there already. But if no one calls attention to this important point, we just keep fumbling about, and we don't know. In reality, we all want to be without suffering. We just don't know the method to extinguish suffering. We only want what is good, but we don't know what evil is. When we don't know evil, we take it to be something good. When we don't understand that those things are bad, it is as if we're walking along the road, and we don't want to step in dog droppings. When we don't watch our feet as we're walking, we'll step right into it, and it smells awful. We won't say that we want the stench, but in the meantime it is stuck to our shoes. So we go and wash it off, but sometimes the smell lingers on, because it got kind of absorbed in the solace. This is just the same. We don't want evil, but we simply don't know where evil is lurking, or how to wash it off. Evil is to be deluded, to be caught up in ourselves, to not see our very mind and life, to not see our mind the moment that it thinks. To see the mind as it is thinking, is to see the Dhamma, the Buddha says. This is seeing the Dhamma on the more subtle level. The Buddha said at one point that virtue is the means to eliminate the crude defilements, concentration is the means to eliminate the medium defilements, and wisdom is the means to eliminate the refined defilements. My teachers used to say this, but I didn't understand it. Virtue, which is supposed to eliminate the coarse defilements, is not that kind of virtue. That is just virtue of society. Can we eliminate defilements by making merit, making offerings, and keeping precepts? It is meritorious, but it still can't deal with defilements. We have all made merit, made offerings, and kept precepts. That is just virtuous conduct, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm referring to the practice of Dhamma. The practice of Dhamma and virtuous conduct are different. The latter is merit, and it is wholesome, but it can't deal with defilements. So it's just a matter to do with society. The way to make merit, make offerings, and keep precepts still differs from neighborhood to neighborhood, from village to village, from district to district, and from province to province. Because it is still an affair of society. It is a matter of views and opinions, that is not yet the Dhamma. One does whatever one wants to do. One does things according to one's opinions and desires, doing things out of greed, like being in a cave. We see it in the dark, depending on candles, lit temporarily only. As we're making merit, we feel slightly happy. Like a lump of ice, it only stays in a solid state for a short time. It's hard to mold water into a lump, or to catch the wind and make it into a lump. It's not easy to do. How does one grab it? One might be able to grab some water, but not for long, it won't remain. Therefore, the teachings of the Buddha are extremely deep and profound. Only people with little dust in their eyes, or people who are determined and interested to use his teachings in practice, as the way to do something about suffering, can understand it. But if we don't want those teachings and we're not interested in using them to do something about suffering, then the teachings of the Buddha are hard to understand, hard to figure out, because we don't look at ourselves. We don't see ourselves. Ordinary people can only understand things that are solid, objects that can be seen with the eyes and touched with the hands. But on a deeper level, that is to say on the level of the mind, on the level of our life, we've never looked and never seen. But when we see and understand, we see something supreme and marvelous. Marvelous means something that we've never had, seen, or known to be like this. When we see, know, and understand, we disseminate the teaching of the Buddha that we have practiced, so that people who don't yet know, may know, people who don't yet see, may see, and people who don't yet understand, may understand. As for the people who are not yet interested in such talk, the Buddha said to just leave them, let them go. You can't get everyone to accept it. The Buddha was the same. When he was still alive, he taught, according to his vision, knowledge, and understanding. As he saw and understood things, he would explain them. And we are the same, we must try to revive the teachings of the Buddha and spread them. These days, there are plenty of people who claim to spread the teachings of the Buddha, but they understand little, they don't understand much. Some people snatch teachings about ghosts and spread them, and then they claim that they are the teachings of the Buddha. Others seize the teaching of Brahmanism and spread them, saying that it is Buddhism. Others grab hold of the teachings of sects that revere angels, and they disseminate those teachings, claiming them to be the Buddha's words, and so forth. People who practice this way can't make head or tail of things, so the whole lot is, falsely, claimed to be Buddhism. This is an unfortunate state of affairs. These days, we can see this quite easily. Magical teachers bless medallions, and recite incantations over amulets and talismans, they hang them around your neck, or tie them around your waist, and tell you that you are invulnerable to getting stabbed by a knife, or getting shot by a gun. This is a misunderstanding of reality. Some people teach respect to and fear of ghosts, and offer things to them. It goes as far as that. Some people teach the awaiting of lucky signs and auspicious times before going ahead with matters. If the omens are not good, they don't do it. Some people perform ceremonies and sacrifices to make requests from the angels, for help in ridding themselves of bad things. These are not the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha doesn't teach us to bow to ghosts. These practices existed already before the time of the Buddha. They have existed since time immemorial. These opinions are similar to being in a cave and lighting a fire. The darkness hides on the opposite side of us, it doesn't go far. As soon as the fire goes out, it's dark, and we can't get out of the cave. But when we stand outside the cave, we can look back into the cave and see the darkness, we can see the shape of the cave, we can look around us and see everything. Nothing is concealed from us. To see like this is not the same as before. I'm telling you this so that you understand. When you practice, understand things as the Buddha teaches, then you are a disciple of the Buddha. When we see according to the Buddha's way, we don't have to be afraid of ghosts or angels. In the chants praising the virtues of the Buddha, it says that he is the teacher of gods and men. No need to mention ghosts, the Buddha is the teacher of even the gods. But we never see these angels, we don't know where they live, so we have to use some intelligence here. We have eyes, ears, and so on. The eyes are for looking, the ears are for listening, the nose is for smelling, and so forth. That's how we get to know things. We must see both what is good and what is bad. Our ears get to listen to what is good, as well as to what is bad, our nose smells both good and unpleasant odors. We know things this way. If we don't use awareness and wisdom, we'll follow our moods and go wrong in an instant. Once we have gone off, it's difficult to solve the problem, sometimes we can't solve it at all. If we know that we have gone wrong, we listen and solve the problem. This is called being a pundit. We never heard it and never thought about it, but when we listen, we adapt and solve the problem ourselves. This is called being wise. But some people hear the teachings of the Buddha, and it just goes over their heads. They are people with thick heads, they don't listen. When one doesn't listen, one doesn't solve one's problems. These people have dust in their eyes, they are like flowers that are unable to bloom, as the Buddha said. The Buddha gave this comparison. There exist 4 types of lotuses. The first kind has risen above the surface of the water, and is ready to bloom as soon as the sun comes out. The second kind blooms after receiving sunlight for several days. The third kind is still submerged, and the fourth kind is still stuck in the mud, food for the fish and the turtles. It's like this. When we listen, we must determine to listen, and, having listened, we must determine to put it into practice. We must practice within ourselves, not believe fancy teachings. Don't believe them. Like guns that won't shoot, and knives that won't cut. The Buddha teaches with awareness and wisdom. He doesn't teach in that style. Have you observed it, these days, that in Thailand we have more problems because of the incantations? When we have amulets and medallions, we go and steal, rob, kill, drink and gamble, thinking that we are invulnerable. The Buddha says that this is wrong. Fools come into being in this way. Don't go and mess with them, don't have anything to do with them. Instead of blessing medallions, better to bless yourself to be awake. Those incantations are just fantasy, they are for people without eyes, ears, and a nose. It is wrong teaching. Even monks still teach it, until someone gets killed, and people scramble for the medallions, as we can read in the newspaper sometimes. When someone has gone wrong, how can he or she practice rightly? The Buddha affirmed, we are told, that whether Buddhism flourishes or degenerates depends upon the four types of Buddhists, i.e., bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male and female monks, laymen and laywomen. If there is progress, it is because they listen and understand and practice correctly in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha. Buddhism should prosper and be safe in the future. But if it degenerates or disappears, it must be because of the four types of Buddhists. If they have not listened properly, remembered wrongly, and practiced in the wrong way, degeneration and destruction must follow. But the teachings of the Buddha prosper in themselves. Whoever practices accordingly makes progress and is safe. Every time we make merit, we invite monks to come and chant. The monks chant, but they chant in Pali, so we don't understand. When we don't understand, what is sacred or auspicious about it? It is not so, because we don't understand. It's only auspicious when we understand that it is sacred and auspicious. The monks chant, Namo, Thassa, Bhagavato, Arahato, Samma Sambuddhassa, and then, Bhutang, Dhammang, Sangkhang, etc. This is supposed to be wholesome, but it is chanted in Pali, and we don't understand it. It is actually wholesome, but it is in Pali, so we should translate it in order that we understand. Is it sacred to chant Namo Thassa? Can we bless anything that way? No. First, it has to be translated. Namo Thassa, Bhagavato means, homage to the Blessed One, Arahato means, one who is far from defilements, from enemies, far from danger, Samma Sambuddhassa, the Buddha sees like that, know like that. That's what we hear, so we should practice like that, according to the teachings of the Buddha, so we can be taken to be one who practices, following the Buddha. When people are shooting each other, stabbing each other, getting drunk or gambling, don't go close. This is being far from defilements. The defilements want to go, we must stay far away. Next, the monks chant, Bhutang, Saranang, Kachami, I take refuge in the Buddha, who can really eliminate danger. If we have confidence in the teachings of the Buddha, we can really eliminate suffering and danger. Dhammang, Saranang, Kachami, I take refuge in the Dhamma, which can really eliminate danger, it is true. If we have confidence in the teachings of the Buddha, we can really eliminate danger. Sangkhang, Saranang, Kachami, I take refuge in the Sangha, which can really eliminate danger. But the trouble is that we don't have confidence. And so, we can't eliminate danger. To say that we don't have confidence is not quite correct. We don't understand. We don't comprehend. We don't know whether the monks who chant can eliminate danger or not. Maybe they don't understand either, because they don't talk about themselves. And so, we practice along, without comprehending. After that, the monks chant, Yojak Kuma, Mohamalah Pagadto, which means, the Noble One has the sight of wisdom, and has removed the stain of delusion. Delusion is to be caught up in something. To remove delusion is to remove identification with things. Saman Waputto Sukatho Awimutto, when delusion has been removed, one is a well-gone one, that is, one goes well, one comes well, one doesn't stumble into things or fall into a ditch. One follows the clear path, namely, we get out of the cave. To be out of the cave means to be beyond thought. If we live in a cave, we're not willing to come out of it, so we don't see the cave. We never see our own thoughts, even once, from birth to death we never see our own thoughts. Some people say they know and see thought, but they don't see it, because they see and know it within the cave, so they are under the power of defilements. They can't eliminate delusion. The teachings of the Buddha are for really seeing, for really knowing. If we don't see and know, our practice is faulty. Therefore, making merit, making offerings and keeping precepts, if we do it right, really is merit, is wholesome, it is virtuous and is Dhamma. But if it is done wrongly, it's not merit, it's not virtuous, nor is it Dhamma, and one doesn't get merit or anything wholesome. That's the way it is. Then the monks chant, Asavanajapalanang, Huntathananjasavanat. This is the Pali language. We don't understand it, but we think it is holy and is able to chase off ghosts, bad luck and misfortune. That's true, actually, if we understand it. Without understanding, it can't chase away anything. Asavanajapalanang means we don't associate with fools, we won't mess with them, we won't have anything to do with them, we won't believe what they say. For example, people who drink booze, gamble, take drugs, quarrel and argue, using weapons, are these people fools or are they wise? The Buddha says they are fools, don't associate with them. Buntathananjasavanat, we respect things that are useful, we don't revere ghosts, we don't beseech ghosts. What are ghosts? A ghost is someone who does evil, speaks evil, and thinks evil. People who are foul-mouthed we call demons. Don't mess with that kind of people. People who do good, speak nicely and think in good ways, they are just like angels. A good heart, just like the Dhamma. That's what we say where I come from. It is convention, these words, but it is true too. The Buddha teaches like this. So when we venerate people with virtuous qualities, we don't do anything wrong and we don't speak improperly. This is what is meant by Pochajakpoachanayanang, a Thummungkalamuthamung. This is auspicious for us, it is auspicious to obey the teachings of the Buddha. Just as monks coming to chant is not auspicious in itself, it is not right when we don't understand. Going deeper, the real fool, or the inner fool, is delusion, and the internal wise one is awareness wisdom, the quality of knowing. Really comprehend this. That we're developing insight is in order to see clearly. Seeing clearly and, that type of, peace, are two different things. If we don't feel our minds thinking, we still don't understand the teachings of the Buddha deeply enough, even though we may be making merit, offering things, observing precepts, developing tranquility meditation, and even developing insight meditation. People may say that they are meditating, but it is still not considered to be profound knowledge. That is how I understand it. Even though someone may never have entered a monastery, never listened to a Dhamma talk, never observed the precepts, if that person feels his or her mind thinking and realizes it, that individual has come close to the Buddha. Or one might say that he or she abides with the Buddha. Have you ever heard that the Buddha said, "Whoever sees the Dhamma sees me, whoever doesn't see the Dhamma, doesn't see me"? Even though taking hold of a corner of my robe or of my finger, he doesn't see me? Don't think that seeing the Dhamma means to see colors, lights, crystal balls, or ghosts, angels, heaven and hell. That is just fantasy. It's not the Dhamma. To see the Dhamma, we have to see ourselves acting, speaking, and thinking. That's one part of it. Another, deeper part is to see the mind as it is thinking. This pacifies greed, hatred, and delusion. But if one listens properly and puts them into use, they are not too deep. Insight can be developed easily by our studying and developing awareness. The Buddha teaches that developing awareness has great benefit. We know from the books that the Buddha said there are two things that are of great assistance, namely sati, recollection, and sampajanya, awareness. Teachers tell us to recollect before acting, speaking and thinking, and to be aware while acting, speaking and thinking. These are still mere words, the person who utters them might still not comprehend, or it may be that he or she might, in fact, know. We are not aware of whether that teacher does or not, because he or she doesn't say so. How do we practice with this? In addition to knowing the words, we must know the method of practice. It's not just a matter of learning how to talk, being able to tell others. Being able to talk is not the same as practice. In practice, we really have to practice, we have to train. Suppose we have an iron ingot for making a knife. Can we cut anything with it? No, it is still a bar of iron. We have to melt it first and make that knife, or an axe, or a hoe out of it, before we can use it according to its function. To practice insight, we develop awareness in this fashion, and we will know according to the function and law of nature. If we don't know how the method works, we'll use it in the wrong way, straight off. The teachings of the Buddha are useful, but if we don't know how to use them, just studying them, remembering them, and then boasting about our knowledge, this is not right. It is boasting that we know more than others, using the Pali as a weapon. The 84,000 teachings of the Buddha are for studying in order to remember, and then to use as a solution to suffering. Having studied them, we use them in order to abandon defilements. The teachings are not to be used for studying and then seeking profit, status, and fame. The Buddha wants us to study, remember, and then to use the teachings as a tool, for dealing with and abandoning suffering. When we have solved and abandoned suffering, we can work, make a living, and buy and sell without suffering. That's what he teaches. It's not that after knowing the Dhamma, we don't work and make money. That's not correct. Don't understand it that way. The word defilement doesn't refer to money, cars, or houses. It refers to greed, hatred, and delusion, jealousy and oppression. Working to earn money, so one can buy a car, depends on our effort and on how much we save. This we consider as working according to our duties. If we can't save $1, we can't save $10 or $20. But if we can save $1, then when we have $10 or $100, we can save it. The Buddha teaches us to save and to work according to duty. Parents as well as children do their duties. Teachers, students, policemen, soldiers, government officials, and everyone does their duties. When everyone is doing his duty, the country is in peace, is cool, and we live without suffering. Be happy with the work you're doing, don't be happy with someone else's work. The wise say work in order to work, don't work in order to get. Work following your duty. We don't understand this matter like this. Whatever work we do we just want to get. It is like this, it is working for the defilements. The defilements want to get. They command us, and we suffer, because we are forced by defilements. When we have some project and we can't carry it out, we're disappointed, we suffer. This is because we don't work according to duty, we don't know how to work in order to work. So don't think like that, but follow your duty. Suppose we come and stay here. We come to develop insight. We have to do it, whether we know or not. We have to listen to the teacher. When the teacher says to do walking meditation, we should do it. We walk in order to build up awareness, feel these little movements. We know in full awareness the movements of the body, turning the hand up and down, raising and lowering the arm, walking back and forth, leaning to the right and the left, bending and raising the head, blinking the eyes, opening the mouth, swallowing saliva, breathing in and out, etc. This is called being aware. Train in awareness. See, know, and understand. Get familiar with awareness. When the mind thinks, be ready, waiting for it with awareness, just like a cat and a rat. The mind thinks. We know, see, and understand, and the thoughts come to a halt, right away. When thought ceases, it is not concocted further. Of this the Buddha says, dependent origination is not being conditioned. The Buddha explains through dependent origination that avidya is the condition for the arising of formations. Formations are the conditions for the birth of consciousness, consciousness conditions mentality materiality, namarupa give rise to the six senses, the six senses concoct contact, contact is the ground for feeling to arise, and it goes on until it turns to sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That's how it goes. Now, we see thought. We see, know, and understand. Thought stops and so there is no avidya. There is no avidya because we see and know. Therefore, it changes into vidya. Vidya translates as seeing clearly. As for avidya, it means not knowing. Avidya is not knowing, but, actually, it is a kind of knowledge, but it is not a clear seeing. Avidya is to not see our mind, vidya is to see our mind. This is Dhamma on the deep level. This is the source of merit. It is the origin of wholesomeness, the source is right here. Problems and suffering are born right here. We have to study according to the Buddha's teaching. If we don't see this point, right here, it means that we don't see the origin of suffering, we don't see the origin of merit. They are opposites like this, there is bright and dark, there is white and black. When there is blackness, we don't see anything white, and if there is whiteness, we don't see blackness. When there is darkness, there is no brightness, when there is brightness, there is no darkness. If we catch this point, there is no delusion. There is no greed, hatred, and delusion. We don't have to chase it away. We think that they exist because we don't see them, we don't see the defilements over here. We say that we want to let go of defilements but we don't see them and so we can't let them go. There are no defilements. The method, to see your mind, right here. When we see our mind every moment, at all times, every second, this is called training ourselves. When it is like this, when we are working and someone blames us or praises us, the speed of awareness really catches up with the good or bad things in the mind. It flashes in, really fast, faster than sound, faster than light, even faster than electricity or whatever is fast. Awareness that has been trained, the mind that has been trained, is like this. I dare to insist and guarantee that the teachings of the Buddha are a pair with the world, they don't avoid the world. Whoever can practice like this is called someone beyond the world. Being beyond the world doesn't mean going up into the sky. Being beyond the world means to be above the objects of the mind, beyond suffering. When it is finished, there is nothing that can proliferate anymore. It is as we chant, we sung Karaka Thang Jit Thang, the mind has reached the state that cannot be concocted anymore. That's what it's like. Supplement. Biography of Luangpor Teean. Birth. Luangpor was born in the village Bohom, Chiang Khon District, Leh Province, on Tuesday, the 5th of September 1911. The name of his father was Jean, his mother's name Soam, and his family name is Intapu. Luangpor's real name was Pun Intapu. The reason that he is known as Luangpor Teean, is that in the vicinity where he lived, it was the custom to call someone according to the name of his firstborn child. Luangpor's first son was named Teean, so relatives and friends called him, Por Teean, father of Teean. His wife's name was Ham, and she was called Mae Teean, mother of Teean. Luangpor had 5 brothers and sisters, 4 brothers, namely Sai, Pui, Huan, and Pon, and 1 sister, named Wuan. His sister, now called Aunt Num, is the only sibling still alive. The others have all passed away. Childhood. Luangpor's childhood was pretty much the same as that of other children who live out in the countryside, far from civilization. On waking up in the morning, he would help his parents with working in the fields and looking after the cows and buffaloes. In the evening, he would herd them back home. Luangpor said that he never had a chance to study in a school because there was no school around where he lived. To study, one had to travel to a more developed area, and communication at that time was not yet convenient. So Luangpor was not able to travel to a school far away from his village. Luangpor said that in the area where he lived, there was virtually no material development. He had never seen a train, a car, an airplane, or even a bicycle. Novice ordination. When Luangpor was about 10 years old, his uncle, who was a monk and had been studying in Hubon Ratchathani province, came to ask the boy's parents to let him be ordained as a novice, so that he could assist and serve the uncle. The name of the uncle monk was Yakupong Junsuk, who had been ordained since he was very young, and he stayed in the robes. Before Luangpor was ordained as a novice, he used to go to the local monastery where his uncle stayed, every morning and evening. This monastery was called Wat Pu, or Wat Bun Pot Kiri, and it was located not far from his home. Before going to the fields, Luangpor would take food and flowers to his uncle and pay respects, and in the evening, after hauling water from the stream, he would return to the monastery. After his ordination as a novice, his uncle taught him to do the morning and evening chanting and how to request precepts, and he would give the boy a Dhamma talk. The monk also taught him about lucky signs and how to practice meditation, including walking meditation. Luangpor learned the Lao language and scriptural language written on leaves. They studied without writing, just by memory. At night, after studying, the uncle would take him to do walking meditation. The uncle was diligent in practice, sometimes getting up at night to start walking. The path for walking was almost 40 meters long, and Luangpor would walk beside him, about 10 meters away. As for training in meditation, the uncle had Luangpor sit cross-legged, in full lotus position, with his eyes closed as he recited the syllable, dhud, on the in-breath, and tho, on the out-breath. At that time the uncle had several friends, monks, who taught meditation. Luangpor remembered one of them who taught him meditation. His name was Ajahn, teacher, Sao. When Ajahn Sao saw Luangpor practicing dhud though, he stated that one cannot climb a tree from the top, one has to start at the roots. He had Luangpor count the breaths, in 1, out 2, in 3, and so forth until 10. On reaching 10, one counts backward down to 1 and starts from there again, continuously. Ajahn Sao said that to practice like this is sacred. If one is stabbed he should practice like this and blow on the wound, the blood will immediately stop flowing. When one sleeps out in the forest, where there are tigers and ghosts, he should bless stones by practicing in this way that the monk taught, put them in a circle around oneself, and sleep in peace. The tigers and ghosts will be afraid and they will not dare to come close. Uncle taught Luangpor to concentrate on agasana by using a circle drawn with the feet, about a meter away, and concentrate on it until one sees light. In the morning one should look at the sun without blinking until the eyes get used to looking at the sun. Uncle said that one who can do this is a fire-eyed hermit. When concentrating on someone, that person will collapse immediately, or one can create a fire through concentration. The uncle also had incantations to shorten the earth. Luangpor said that his uncle was a tall man with white skin, like a Westerner. When walking behind him, Luangpor had to run to keep up with him. Later, Luangpor realized that the incantation to shorten the earth was like this: uncle had long legs, and one stride of his would equal 3 of Luangpor's steps. Once, Luangpor went with his uncle to Laos, but because Luangpor was still a child, he cried whenever anyone talked about home. So, in the end he had to return back home. Luangpor was a novice, staying with his uncle for 1 year, and during that time he learned quite a few chants. This was because the uncle had studied in Huabon and he had studied chants from Cambodia as well. When Luangpor disrobed, he was sorry that he could not study more of these superstitions. At that time he wanted to be able to fly, become invisible, have the celestial eye and ear, shorten the earth and be invulnerable to attacks with knives and guns, just like his uncle. In those days, in that area, there was still considerable belief in ghosts. A boy was expected to know protective verses in order to look after himself and his family. His uncle had compassion on him and taught him seriously. First monk ordination. When Luangpor was 20 years old, he ordained again with his uncle. The head monk of Chiang Khon district was his preceptor. Luangpor trained in meditation and chanting with his uncle, as before. He learned nothing new but developed what he had learned already. Besides this, he traveled, which was a kind of training. He didn't understand the real purpose of it. He stayed at charnel grounds, fields close to villages, or in little huts in the fields close to villages, so that going on alms round was not too difficult. Lay life. Luangpor was a monk for 6 months and then disrobed. His mother had arranged for him to get married in his early 20s. His wife's name was Ham, a relative. Ham's mother was the younger sister of Luangpor's father. Both Luangpor and his wife had been fatherless from childhood. Luangpor stayed with his wife for a long time without having children, so they looked after the son of his wife's elder sister, who had divorced her husband. Later, Luangpor had 3 sons named Neam, Teean, and Theam. When Luangpor's first son was born, everyone called the father Por Neam. When Neam was 5 years old, he died, and Luangpor's name changed to what we are now all familiar with. Luangpor's second son, Teean, died about 2 years before Luangpor passed away. Incantations. Luangpor tells us that during the time that he was a householder, he used the incantations that he had learned from his uncle. Sometimes neighbors would ask him to act as a witch doctor, chasing off ghosts or curing sick people. At home, he was regarded as the protector of the family. At that time, he was still interested in magic and religious chanting, and he wanted to have psychic powers and be able to perform miracles. This was because certain stories from scriptures had an influence on him. He tried to accumulate more knowledge about magic. Having finished learning with his uncle, he searched for other teachers. After his uncle had died, he heard that there was an Ajahn even more accomplished than his uncle, living in Laos by the name of Yako Bunma Don Pung. This teacher raised peacocks. He put a cover over their legs and released them. Westerners tried to shoot the birds, but were unable to do so. Luangpor spent a rains retreat with this teacher. He learned a great deal of knowledge, or should it be called stupidity, from this Yako. For example, invulnerability verses which all turned out to be worthless. Luangpor said, "A stupid person cannot teach a wise person, only a wise person can teach a wise person or can teach a stupid person to become wise." Inclination to merit making. Luangpor tells us that he was interested in merit from the time that he was young, and he always used to be the leader of the village in merit-making ceremonies. At that time, he was the head man of his village, and people respected him a great deal. He was about 27 or 28 at that time. He would encourage people to participate in making merit. Even to people who had committed serious acts such as killing, he still gave the opportunity to be included. There were many ways of making merit in his village. For example, sharing out rice during the rains retreat. On the Buddhist moon days, once a week, the villagers would invite monks to give a Dhamma talk at their homes. The villagers would gather together at that particular house. They would make sweets, their children would make Thai vermicelli and Chinese food, and they would offer the monks betel nut and cigarettes. Luangpor said that, at that time he didn't know, but afterwards he understood that in fact it is not meritorious to offer betel nut, a mild drug to chew on, and cigarettes to monks. It is in fact, encouragement to monks to indulge in bad habits. We want to give up defilements, but we don't know what they are. We may think it is good, and that is what others say, but Luangpor's view is that it is not. Luangpor stopped offering these things to monks and told his family to do likewise. But what other people do is their business. Luangpor would not forbid them and was not interested in their criticism. During the rains retreat, the old people would spend the day in the monastery on the moon days. Some of the young people would go also, others not, depending on their faith. But Luangpor used to go because his uncle would teach there. After the rains retreat, the annual robe offering ceremony was celebrated. This was a big ceremony that lasted a month and had to be booked in advance. In addition, there were yearly ceremonies for making merit. All the villagers would help out. When the monks taught on these occasions, they would simply read from palm leaves. There would be entertainment as well, with music. There was the bamboo rocket festival. Once lit, the rockets, made in a variety of sizes, were as loud as an airplane. In later days, Luangpor had this rocket festival stopped because of the danger, and it was a waste of money. Another merit-making ceremony was taken up with many Dhamma talks, given in a single day. Profession. After disrobing, Luangpor worked in the fields and orchards, and he did a bit of trading. Eventually, Luangpor had 7 boats for buying and selling on the Mekong River, between Nong Khai and Chiang Khon. His business did well, and his profits increased. Luangpor's father was also experienced in trading by boat, but he had died when Luangpor was still small. Afterwards, a department of agriculture was established, and things had to be transported. So Luangpor started to trade with Laos, but his family was still in Thailand. He made a good profit and sold his boats to buy a steamboat. Luangpor said that even though he was successful in trading, he was not happy, even while resting. There was still suffering, the result of thinking about money and the things he would buy and sell. The reason for searching the truth. Before Luangpor set out to practice Dhamma and understanding arose according to his method, he had practiced quite a lot of meditation already. But it was not enough to help him overcome suffering. When asked, "What kind of suffering did you have before practicing?" Luangpor answered that, at one time, someone in Laos had asked him to arrange a robe offering ceremony in Laos. There were as many as 5 bundles of offerings, because many people wanted to participate. With these ceremonies there should be some entertainment, like music and movies. Luangpor arranged with his wife that she would look after the money business and the food. As for Luangpor himself, he would observe the precepts and receive visitors. In the morning, his wife asked, "How much money should I give to the entertainers?" This question triggered great anger in Luangpor. He later said that he could hardly move. But he managed to repress the mood and not show it to his wife, and just said with a forced smile, "That's your business." But the anger remained there in his mind. After the ceremony was finished and the family were having dinner, he started to think aloud about what had happened that morning. People who don't have respect are like this. He repeated it a few times so that it struck his wife's mind. His wife, having taken the children to bed, asked, "You're angry about my asking you about the money for the entertainers, aren't you?" "That's right," Luangpor said. His wife said, "What is wrong about husband and wife consulting each other about spending money?" Luangpor agreed with the words of his wife and realized that he was wrong, that he was unyielding and just tried to beat her in argument. His wife said, "You're dissatisfied, and you have fallen into hell." Luangpor saw that what his wife said was true. These simple words of his wife affected him so much that he took his wife to be his teacher. His wife had made things clear to him. Before, Luangpor didn't know that anger is heavy suffering, that it is like falling into hell. Even when making so much merit with the ceremony, he still felt as though he were in hell. It seemed as if he had not gained any merit, because he felt heavy-hearted all day. But on hearing his wife's words, he felt better and could abandon the mood to some extent. But how to really deal with his thoughts, he didn't know. He resolved in his mind, if I cannot conquer this kind of suffering, I won't give up practicing the Dhamma. Luangpor thought about this matter for years. He tried to buy and sell less, and in the end he decided to stop working altogether. And so he cleared up all his accounts and money matters with his colleagues. Luangpor was the kind of person who had to prepare things a long time in advance. It took him almost 3 years to arrange everything the way he wanted. Luangpor met with a monk who had studied all the scriptures. He was a few years younger than Luangpor, and his name was Mahasi Jun. He had traveled down the Mekong on Luangpor's steamboat and had stayed in caves and charnel grounds. Luangpor had offered him a meal and looked after him at that time. When they met again, they talked together about meditation from 6 in the evening until 6 in the morning. Luangpor asked many questions. In the end, the monk told him that insight meditation can only be known through practice, there is no end to asking questions. Luangpor thought about this conversation and about practice for 3 years without actually practicing, just searching for a good teacher. The decision to practice Dhamma. When Luangpor was over 40 years of age, he completely stopped trading. He no longer had work to do, and kept reflecting that people are born and have to die, not being able to take anything along with them. Rich people have to die, poor people have to die, what is there, then, that is of value? There is just evil and merit. In the end, he decided to go forth and practice Dhamma, the way to go beyond suffering. He told his wife of his intentions, and she prepared things for him. But he did not tell her where he was going, nor for how long, simply saying that if he did not die, he would come back again. Having reached Nong Khai province, he got the news that his friend, the monk Mahasi Jun, with whom he wanted to practice, had gone to spend the rains retreat at Luang Prabang, in Laos. There was only Luangpor One Tong, who was a former assistant district officer, who, having retired, had ordained as a monk. There was another monk by the name of Pan, who checked people's progress in meditation with interviews. He was Laotian, and had learned the Dingning meditation practice, and the rising-falling practice, from Burma. When Luangpor arrived at the monastery, he hired some Vietnamese people to build him a hut. Luangpor said that he used to be a self-willed person, his clothes had to be nicely ironed, otherwise he didn't want to wear them. So he hired some people to do that and also to prepare food for him. Luangpor paid them 300 baht per month for that. But in the end, the monastery didn't agree with this, because other people might get the feeling that it is necessary to have money and hire people in order to practice Dhamma. So they suggested that Luangpor should offer the money up to be used for food expenses, for everyone who was practicing, including those ordained and those not ordained. Luangpor agreed but asked to have one person to iron for him, and bring him a hot drink with a biscuit in the morning. This, the monastery didn't object to. The meditator. During the time that Luangpor was practicing Dhamma, there were altogether about 30 meditators, 23 monks and 5 lay people, 2 men and 3 women 19 or 20 years old. As for the monks, they had all been ordained for several years, at least 2 years, some 5 years, 8 years, 12 years, or even 15 years. There was also a senior monk with a title, he did nothing but hammer nails into things. He pulled down one of the huts and repaired it, making lots of noise. Luangpor kept wondering when it was going to be finished. Another practitioner was Mr. Hoipor Mook, a trader who was acquainted with Luangpor and who had given him considerable advice about how to make a living. This man would come to chat with Luangpor while Luangpor was engaged in practicing. Later on, whenever Luangpor saw him coming, he would wrap his head in a cloth and do walking meditation out in the sun. Luangpor hired some Vietnamese people to make a lot of noise or to start building a road in the middle of the field, in order to discourage him. Hoipor Mook caught on, but he presumed that Luangpor hated him. That was not the case, it was simply that Luangpor felt one should practice seriously, not waste time talking or doing other useless things. Practicing and knowing Dhamma. Luangpor One Tong, instructed the attendees to ask for a meditation object and to determine their time to begin and stop practicing. Everyone was enjoined to keep the 8 precepts. Luangpor had kept them since he was a novice. He was told to recite the word death with every in and out breath. Luangpor tried out this method, death, death, death. He started to experience doubts. It was as if there were 2 people in his head. One would say, "What's the point of this? Let's go to sleep." Another voice said, "I came here to practice, didn't I?" It was madness. One moment he was diligent, and the next, he was lazy again. This practice was very similar to practicing Buddha that he had done before. So, in the end, he decided to take a rest. In the morning, he got up, washed his face, brushed his teeth and started anew. Then, Luangpor really practiced. He didn't practice like the others, he was really serious and really determined. This time he practiced the Dingning method, using bodily movements, but without reciting the 2 words to label the movements. He was sitting when a scorpion fell on his leg, a mother with babies, they all ran about over his leg. Luangpor just watched. When the baby scorpions had all returned to their mother, Luangpor got a stick and let them climb onto one end. Taking hold of the other end, he laid down the stick outside. In the blink of an eye, Luangpor had insight. He understood materiality mentality, rupa dhamma, nama dhamma, rupa disease, nama disease. On knowing the latter, spiritual disease, he knew instability, impermanence and non-selfhood, not just knowing from the scriptures, but really knowing. Then, he understood convention. He realized how deluded he had been believing in all those silly verses and incantations to protect him, and make him invulnerable. So much so that tears rolled down his face. Next, he understood religion and Buddhism. Then evil and merit, i.e., he knew now that evil means stupidity, and darkness in the mind, and he knew that merit is to be clever, to know, to hold brightness in the mind that is clean, bright, peaceful, pure, and serene, the mind of the Buddha. This is what Luangpor knew in the morning. Actually, the knowledge he gained was even greater than this, but he only summarized it as topics. There was so much knowledge that he wanted to tell someone, give a Dhamma talk, even to the cows, the buffaloes, or a dog strutting past. He was obviously caught up in defilements due to insight. At that time he didn't know what that was. Everyone has perception, and everyone thus has the ability to know, without exception. This is what he thought, and he felt like teaching people. He thought about his parents, why did they have to die without knowing? What a pity. At about 5 in the afternoon, he took a bath and started doing walking meditation back and forth between 2 trees. Close to 7 o'clock, he felt a jolt, as if someone had shoved him hard in the ribs. Hey, who did that? He was alone, no one was there. Luangpor didn't see thought yet, instead he was looking for the person who had pushed him. Then a thought arose. Oh, the mind thinks. And a third time. Luangpor knew thought. It is similar to a cat and a rat. If there are rats at home, one should get a cat. At first the cat is small and the rat is big. When the rat appears the cat will grab it, but the cat is not strong enough and the rat drags the kitten along. At first, thought will drag awareness along. Don't blame the cat. Don't blame the rat. Rather, give the cat plenty to eat, it will become fat and strong. Now, when a rat shows itself, the big cat pounces on it. That's the end of the rat. The rat dies of shock, and the cat eats the rat without any blood flowing. They say cats are more skillful than tigers. Luangpor watched his mind, and when thought arose, he saw it. When thought is seen, it stops. It's like a boxer entering the ring. There is no time to lose. Go for it. Don't rely on scriptures, the scriptures are within oneself. Luangpor knew the sensations of the various movements, moving the arms, the legs, the hands, the feet, the blinking of the eyes, looking to the right and to the left, raising and lowering the head, leaning to the right and to the left. He was aware he felt the movements, the swallowing of saliva, breathing in and out. Because knowing is very fast, one knows a lot. Suppose 10 people would touch Luangpor at the same time. He would know, really know, at the same time. It is knowledge all around. Luangpor knew, saw, and understood objective matter. It refers to literally everything. And he knew ultimate meaning. It is not knowing, it is seeing, understanding in a profound way, it means reality. And he saw changing conditions, the changing of states of people and animals, they alter. This is what he understood at that time. It all happened very quickly. Then, Luangpor saw greed, hatred, and delusion, not with his eyes but with his mind. A secret scar that others can't see but one does oneself. The scars of greed, hatred, and delusion in their mind that people don't know about. At the time that Luangpor was not at ease and had suffering when he was asked something by his wife, he didn't see it. He didn't see greed, hatred, and delusion. He felt heavy, even though he had practiced a great deal of meditation. So his meditation didn't give him knowledge. But maybe other people would. But practicing this way, there was understanding. There were still feelings, perception, volition, and consciousness, but no suffering because greed, hatred, and delusion couldn't concoct anymore. In the time span it takes to snap one's fingers, Luangpor saw defilements, craving, clinging and kama. These 4 things faded. Suppose his weight was 100 kilos, it was as if 60 kilos had just dropped off him. Actually, it felt more like 80 kilos, leaving only 20. Becoming a noble one occurred at this point. Previously, Luangpor thought that being a noble one meant to shave the head and wear a brown robe, but now he realized that, even though he was wearing trousers, he had become a noble one already. This was about 7 o'clock at night. Luangpor was doing walking meditation, and rapture arose in him. He felt proud that he was now a noble one, or, one could say, an angel with heavenly sight. He saw, knew, and understood, he contacted it intimately, he could respect himself. When he knew Rupanama, he didn't feel like that yet. But now, he thought to himself, this exists in oneself. Why didn't I search for it before, why didn't I make use of it before? He walked for a long time, lay down for a rest, and got up around 2 or 3 a.m. He lit some candles and put them on the side of his path for walking meditation. Just then, a big red centipede, as long as 25 centimeters, crossed his path. It didn't notice Luangpor and went about its business. Luangpor was afraid it might bite him, so he got a candle to see where it had gone. When he didn't see it, he put the candle back in its place and continued walking back and forth very mindfully. Then, the understanding came, virtue is the means to eliminate the gross defilements, concentration is the means to eliminate the medium defilements, and wisdom is the means to eliminate the subtle defilements. The gross defilements are greed, hatred, delusion, craving, clinging and kama. They've already faded and gone. Virtue had appeared. Luangpor understood the aggregates of virtue, concentration, and wisdom. The 5 aggregates of form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness are virtuous. This is not a matter of precepts. He understood feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness to be objects for awareness. It is called Namarupa. That day, Ajahn Hpan came for an interview. How is it going? Nothing is going on, but I feel dizzy and exhausted, Luangpor answered. Do you feel yourself sitting there? Where is your awareness? Ajahn Hpan asked. Luangpor said, I feel myself sitting here and awareness is with me. All right, keep practicing, Ajahn Hpan instructed. Luangpor wanted to have a good long discussion with him because he felt very confident, but he waited for the next time. When the next time came, Luangpor was sitting on the ground, ready for any kind of question. Well, how are you, layman from Chiang Khan. Ajahn Hapan asked. I am not in any mood whatsoever, Luangpor said. He knew that Ajahn Hapan wanted to hear of some problem so he could solve it. Why is there no mood, no obstacle, he inquired. Luangpor said, because I have no pains and nothing in my mind. Next, Ajahn Hapan asked, did any knowledge arise? Yes. What do you know? I know myself, Luangpor said. How is that? Asked Ajahn Hapan. I know the movements, sitting, lying down, I know myself. Someone who doesn't know oneself is like a dead person, Ajahn Hapan remarked. I've really died and I've been born again. Luangpor said. Why do you say that? Because what is dead should be discarded. I've died from what is dirty and bad in the mind. The defiled and dark mind, the dull mind has died, but the body is still there. That is what Luangpor told him. Ajahn Hapan thought for a while and then asked, is salt salty? No, it is not, was the answer. Hey, why is salt not salty? Ajahn Hapan wanted to know. Because the salt is in the kitchen, I'm not contacting it with my tongue right now. And pepper, is it hot? No, it is not, I don't taste it at this moment. What about sugar, is it sweet? Luangpor denied it, that is to say, he took the present as his foundation. Next, Ajahn Hapan asked, what is blacker than black? Black is black, there is nothing blacker than that. On being asked about white and red, he answered in similar fashion. Well, then, said Ajahn Hapan. Suppose this is a forest and someone came to see me here, and on the way back he shot a tiger. Suppose you are over there and you were asked to come here, would you come? Yes, I would, if I'm asked to go, I'll go. It would be disrespectful not to go. Luangpor said. But, objected Ajahn Hapan, a tiger will eat you. I don't see any tigers, said Luangpor. And would you walk on the path or take a shortcut through the forest? Ajahn Hapan inquired. I wouldn't go through the forest. I would take the path. If there is no path, I can't see the tigers coming, but if I walk on the path, I will see tigers straight away, and I can get away from them. But if I don't see them coming, I can't avoid them, explained Luangpor. Ajahn Hapan had no more questions and praised Luangpor for his answers. No one had ever answered as Luangpor had. Luangpor understood the difference between tranquility and insight meditation. If one looks at it from one angle, they cannot go together and are even opposites. Samatha and Vipassana don't go together but they can support each other. Luangpor really understood this matter. With tranquility meditation there is just peacefulness, and on being peaceful, one should create understandings like the perception of unattractiveness through reflection. But with insight, one doesn't need to reflect. Teachers had told Luangpor that in order to practice insight meditation, one had to study 6 topics, namely, 1. The 5 aggregates, 2. The 12 senses, 3. The 18 elements, 4. The 22 faculties, 5. The 4 noble truths and 6. Dependent origination. Luangpor didn't study all that, because he had studied enough already. He knew many things since the time he was a novice. His uncle had taught him. But now, when he was practicing, the knowledge that arose was not just knowing from memory. It was not the same. Insight meditation destroys defilements on all levels, like a tractor, wherever it goes plants and trees, no matter how big, are all uprooted. Greed, hatred, and delusion are pulled out by the roots, defilement, craving and clinging are pulled out by the roots. Luangpor saw the cankers of sensuality, being, and ignorance. He saw that to be attached to peacefulness is what the canker of sensuality is about. As soon as he had seen them, it was as if a tractor pulled them out by the roots. The canker of being refers to being caught up in something. The words being and birth have deep meanings. They can mean the being and birth of the body, or they can mean spiritual being and birth. The word birth also has the connotation of the momentary arising of the sense of self, ego, or me. In other words, one identifies with what one is caught up in. Whatever one calls it, it is just convention. The tractor pulls all of it out by the roots. The canker of ignorance means to not know the truth, not knowing anything or just not knowing one's life. The tractor pulls it all out. Luangpor understood about evil and merit, where and how long one would be reborn, if one performed evil or meritorious actions by body, speech, or mind, or together. Luangpor was walking up and down at 5 a.m., and it was just as if he took his clothes off. He didn't really do that, of course, but he felt so light, as though he was walking about a meter above the ground. He saw his condition being broken. The state of arising passing was right there. Both the body and the mind returned to their original state. There was a break off. This state of arising passing is the most valuable thing. The essence of Buddhism exists in everybody. What happened to Luangpor, everyone must experience. Whether one realizes it or not, one has to come to this point. Everyone is going to die for sure. This is real, this is a truth. It cannot be otherwise, it doesn't alter. Whether one studies or not, whether one is rich or poor, we all have to die. Death is a sure thing, it is directly ahead of us. Everyone should study and practice in order to understand it. When one understands, one is truly at ease, and one will be ready to die at any time. One no longer has to plead with death, because it is fun, one is delighted to die in whatever way. One is not afraid of anything whatsoever. This is called seeing, knowing, and understanding the words of the teachers. Teachers used to say that the Buddha only cut his hair once, and it didn't grow after that. This doesn't refer to hair on the head, rather the mind returns to its original state, and the body returns to its original state. That is why it is not necessary to study about the 12 senses, the 18 elements, etc., etc. One can describe it in terms of the first, second, third jhana and so on, or not, because one knows by oneself. Sontit Tako, to be seen for oneself, Agaliko, not bound by time. Luangpor knew the natural state. In this state, one doesn't have to do anything. He knew this in the morning. The Buddha kills people, talk like this people don't like. In reality, the Buddha doesn't kill anyone, but he kills what is bad. When people develop awareness and wisdom, whatever is bad will die. It will disappear by itself.
May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be